All right, Joe, we are back on the podcast where we are training men in spiritual fitness. How you been doing lately, Joe?
Yeah, surviving. It feels like a busy season of kind of midlife. I don't know if the water level's up to my chin. I'm just barely breathing, I guess.
I'm with you. I'm becoming good at treading water. Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you. So I had a conversation earlier this week. It sounds similar to this conversation, where I was talking with a buddy, and he was telling me just how overwhelmed he is with life right now. And it's just honestly, I hear this a lot. But this is a guy. He's like, young dad, got a bunch of young kids, got a demanding career, and he's actually doing really well at it. So he's successful in his career, got a good, young, growing family. He's active in his church, and he's just kind of seeing that he's got all these roles in life that he enjoys, but it's becoming so overwhelming that I sensed from him is he was really close to this stage of burnout. Like he was just about to hit a wall and give up on everything. And unfortunately, I've seen that, and you've probably seen that before too, where guys usually in their 40s they hit that wall and, and they're like they do give up. Everything does blow up and they do burn out. And I feel like that's something we need to talk about. We have talked a good bit about just the sense of overwhelm that a lot of Christian men feel, that this is a very common problem among Christian guys. That statement of "I feel overwhelmed" is one we hear time and time again. But really want to double down on that idea of burnout, and talking to guys about what is burnout and how do we as Christian men avoid it. So let's just start by what do you see as the problem of burnout today in our modern culture?
I mean, I don't think guys need too much help pointing to a lot of the things that just fill up all of the space in life and pile up the demands. I think, it's a culture we live with an achievement ethic.
Yeah.
Our worth it is defined by what we do. There's been a good recovery of dads being involved in home life. I mean, you see that more and more. With that, though, comes compounded responsibilities. I think just to live the normal life where you got a job and you got some kids and you're super active in their lives. And then the little extra thing, and I think Christian guys need to realize that this is different. We take that model and we add something to it that's
Hmm.
massive, and that's discipleship, and that's being a member of a church. And there's multiple aspects that make this just exasperate the problem, so to speak, because if you're part of a good, kind of Bible focused church that cares about outreach, well, that church is going to have a whole lot of ministries it's constantly pushing and
Yeah.
going to always be asking for more volunteers. And so, you get sucked in this orbit of gravity. It's good stuff, but that fills up a whole lot more of your time. And then, you're hearing all of these messages coming out of the Bible. And let's be honest, if you're paying attention to what Jesus is describing about taking up a cross and following him, that's not a part-time thing. And so somehow you're trying to infuse the whole of your life with a real kind of intentionality,
Hmm.
focused on holiness and spiritual growth. And so, you just kind of put this all together and you try to be a modern man, but also a good Christian. And all of a sudden, it just feels like you have the whole weight of the universe on your shoulders. And it can be very crushing for men.
Yeah, I think what we hear from guys a lot is just not only does the expectations on my life right now feel unachievable, but I also hear that just at some point it feels unfair. Like I've heard a couple of guys say that, like b between yes, work and home life and church life, everything, like is it even fair for me to have these expectations? I don't think I can ever meet it and feel eventually you feel hopeless in that situation. You feel like I'll never be able to meet all these expectations. And yeah, there's a sense of just such overwhelm that you may give up. So I want you to talk to me a minute as a pastor on this. Why should a pastor care about burnout? And I want to ask that in two ways, really. One, honestly, most of the content I hear on burnout is about pastors. And that's because burnout is a huge issue with pastors. So there's a lot of pastors that do hit a wall, they burn out, and they're completely done, and that's unfortunate. And so there is a lot of writing that's always going out there on how to help pastors with burnout. So maybe speak to that, as a pastor. But then also, I feel like there needs to be something out there for pastors to see why should they care about burnout in their congregation. I don't see a lot of content out there as far as directing pastors to think about their people and why they need to be thinking about burnout as an issue in their congregation. So I don't know, just speak to me as a pastor there.
Yeah, in terms of pastors struggling with burnout, I mean, it is an obvious problem. You probably don't need to read headlines. You probably can look around whatever community you live in and identify two or three people that you've watched just burn
Mm,
themselves out. And we could talk about the various things that lead to that. I think we'll cover some of it. But I think that second thing you raised is really interesting because as a pastor, I have people coming to me and kind of asking how I'm doing and trying to make sure that I'm not overloading myself. But as I look out on a Sunday morning, I see guys and they're exhausted.
yeah,
And honestly, I love that you raised that issue of pastors needing to be mindful of ordinary men because guys, as they come in and they're setting up chairs, or again, they're playing music, or they're working at the sound desk, and it's just like that one more thing
yeah.
on their to-do list. And often there's just not the empathy to really look and try to assess, well, what is it like if if you're 38 years old and you got three kids and you're working a job and now Sunday you're adding additional to-dos on a man's responsibility list. Pastors really have to be careful and recognize how depleted a lot of their members are, and to make sure that when you're really pushing them, be more involved in your home group. You're also recognizing, well, what else is going on, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe do you need to help them simplify, and maybe even simplify their spiritual lives, and maybe even ask them to do less things at church in order to make sure that they're able to actually get through what is a difficult life for most men.
That's good. I appreciate you saying that. And you've got here that we're going to go over 9 questions that kind of will help guys avoid burnout. And I want to get to those. But first, I feel like we need to give kind of a clear definition of burnout, or give a little more clarity to what it is that we're talking about. So give me some clarity on what burnout is, and then we'll jump into 9 questions guys need to be asking themselves so that they don't burn out.
Yeah, I think the best image I can give to guys is, so I recently I tore my ACL. Okay,
Hmm.
so was playing basketball, tore my ACL. And so if I go back to that moment, I was running, I was sweating, I was fully in the game, and then all of a sudden that ACL, it just went. And when it went, I went. And I could try to get up and I could try to run or walk, but it just wasn't going to happen. And I think with burnout, there's all of a sudden you hit this tipping point. It's like something, it does crack and you lose. You had motivation. You were going 90 miles per hour. You were shouldering all of it.
Hmm.
Then all of a sudden something collapses and you just can't find it. And so, you reach inside and you wake up early, but there's just this kind of depletion within your own spirit, and so it kind of results in this inability to just get done what needs to be done. And so it's interesting. The NHS, which is the health system here in the UK, their definition of burnout is, avoiding being human for too long. And I think that's really so. It's kind of proud attitude of just thinking you can do everything. Then all of a sudden you reach this place where you're broken and you don't know how to be fixed. And so, guys, we just don't want to reach that place. We want to see the early signs. If I would have, there were a couple of things, if I would have noted earlier, I could have avoided this ACL tear, but I just pushed through it, ended up being hurt.
Because you're not a machine anymore, Joe. You're human. You can't think you're not human.
I'm
Come on.
over 40.
That's right. That's right. Lesson learned. All right, so let's get into, you've got 9 different questions that I think will help guys to avoid burnout. Questions you need to ask yourself regularly, kind of evaluative and assessment type questions for guys. So let's just jump into it. What's the first question that guys need to be asking themselves?
Well, Evan, I'll thank you. You are somebody who's asked me this question. I found it so helpful at various points. But the question is, who am I willing to disappoint?
Hmm.
I think it's really important for guys to see that um, behind burnout is typically this addiction to people pleasing.
Yeah.
And this idea that I can make everybody happy and
Mm.
fulfill their wishes. And just you start taking stock of your kids, your wife, your colleagues, your pastor, your neighbors, your friend, your brothers, your mom, your dad. There's no chance in the world everybody's going to be pleased with what you're doing. And so, there's got to be this question, okay, who can I disappoint?
Mm.
And sometimes their expectations, they're not good to start with.
Mm.
Spurgeon wrote a great book once called The Eccentric Preachers. And
Mm.
he starts out, he defines, eccentric being on the outer end of a circle. And he says, look, the people who've been affected aren't in the middle. They're not doing what everybody else was doing. It's because they were willing to disappoint and be eccentric that they were actually effective. And so guys have to figure out, who are you willing to step out of the circle, disappoint, recognizing that in doing so, you're actually going to make yourself effective for the people that, the people's opinions that really matter.
That's good. I found personally that where I get stuck in this is the overthinking of it. What I've found in practice is that people generally aren't nearly as disappointed by my no as I think they will be. They're just not as bothered by if I feel like, oh man, I'm going to disappoint so and so by telling them no, I can't do this thing for them, or hey, I'm going to be late on this thing. I feel like they're going to be so bothered and so just upset about that when honestly, when I do say no, or I do say, hey, I'm going to be late, or hey, they're not bothered that much. They're just the person that's bothered is me. Like I'm the person that, so I really got to get over disappointing myself in that. And they're not going to be as disappointed as I work myself up to believe that they will be. And so some of this, yeah, it's just getting over that massive problem of people pleasing and thinking you could even do that, that you could achieve, like you said, pleasing all these different people in your lives. All right, so give us the second one. The first one, yeah, who am I willing to disappoint? What's the second one?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit similar. And again, I'm going to give you credit because this is these two questions are ones that I've heard you ask. This is, where am I willing to fail?
Hmm.
And again, behind this is kind of another myth, and this is the myth that we're omnipotent, that we can succeed at everything we set our hand to. And I think one of the things that's interesting to me, and I do this when I read a biography, is I like to think, well, where is this person a failure? They're obviously they succeeded in some things. I mean, somebody wrote a book, and these are some things I've noticed. John Wesley, he was a failure in his marriage. Did a
Huh.
lot of great things, was not a great husband.
Hmm.
And you could say Tozer, same thing. Spurgeon, he failed in terms of his personal physical health. He
Hmm.
was not a healthy man. He
Yeah.
died pretty young, uh, relatively young. Adoniram Judson, I don't think he really cared for his mental health, like a lot of us modern people probably would.
Yeah.
C.S. Lewis, he didn't, sometimes people were shocked by what he did not know in terms of current events. And he was bad with his finances. Um, Dawson Trotman, I don't think he had basic emotional intelligence. And we could go on, but
That's
like
true.
these are great men, but they were huge, massive failures in different areas of their life. And so, we've got to ask that question. We're not going to be good at everything. We're not going to succeed at everything. Where can we fail?
That's good. Man, that list made me feel so much better. That was worth the episode right there, Joe. I'm gonna mark that one, go back and read it. Because I've read those biographies and they are overwhelming. So thank you for reminding me. Those guys can't do it all. And yeah, I like the personal practice of, I think we all probably have a to-do list or at least if it's not on paper it's in our mind. We wake up with a to-do list. I really love the action of making my to-do list for the day and then immediately just marking stuff off. Like there's what I've found is every day when I get to the end of my list, I've never completed everything on my to-do list. There's never been a day when I've actually done it all. Never. So let me go ahead and start my day by saying, I'm not going to accomplish all these things. Let me mark off five of them. Just go ahead and start my day by saying, I'm going to fail these things now so that it's not looming over me the rest of the day. I know I'm not going to finish everything on my list. Let me just fail early so that I have freedom in my mind and presence to be able to do just a few things really well. So yeah, I like that question. Where am I willing to fail today? Um, all right, what's the third question that you got?
Third one, again, these are all related, but when is good enough?
Hmm.
So people have maybe heard, the great can be the enemy of the good.
Yeah.
And again, this is that kind of perfectionism, but I think so. For an example of this is I live in Scotland. I live in the United Kingdom, and British people, they love their gardening. They have these exquisite, these beautiful kind of like gardens, flowers, and all the rest of it. And they've been doing this for hundreds of years. My family is good at killing plants, trampling grass. And so uh, I'm never going to have a great, we would call it a yard in the US, but I'm never going to have a great garden. So if I can keep the grass cut, if I can make sure it doesn't look like, we're living in a jungle, then for me, that's where I am in life, and that's
Yeah.
where I need to be. And so, again, it's not that you're failing, but you are lowering standards to where you're saying, okay, good is enough. It doesn't have to be great.
Yeah, yeah, you can't do everything top notch. You can't be the best at every little thing. You're just gonna have to, yeah, some stuff is gonna be mailed in a sense. Not in a sense of I don't think you're pushing guys to not be diligent in any way. Like, of course, be diligent, but it's impossible to, yes, have the perfect garden and all these other things. So otherwise, yeah, you're gonna burn out if that's your expectation. Because yeah, look, I think one of the most beautiful words in the English language is finished. Like I'm done. Like so like there's some projects you just need to say finished. It's finished and move on. If you can get to that point of just it's done, and yeah, it's never going to be fully done. You're never going to feel like this is perfect, yeah, but finished and move on. And good is good enough. It's time to move on. All right, what's the fourth question?
Yeah, this is what in life can I say that there's someone else who could do this?
Yeah.
Um, I think I like to often this isn't so much in my mind delegating, but I like to think often of being in the passenger seat. And so often, there are people who are willing to drive. They might need some help, they might need someone there with them, but you don't have to be in the driver's seat. And I think guys just really need to ask, what in my life is there really somebody else that could do this? And I'll be really honest, I'm speaking as a pastor who's constantly looking for volunteers. Church is a great example of this, where often you have to be willing to step out, trusting there's someone else who can step in. Now, you need to be involved. I'm gonna push guys and say, be involved with your church, but there's often a lot of gifting spread around.
Mhm.
And so that feeling that like the Sunday school's going to crumble if I don't step in and volunteer, that's not the mentality.
Yeah.
We've got to be willing to ask, of the roles, what are the most important? I can't step out. I mean, I
Yeah.
can't stop being a dad. Nobody else can do that. Can't stop being a husband. There's going to be some other things that I volunteer, but then there's going to be some roles where I can say, well, I'll be honest, if I stepped out, it might be hard for the group. It might be hard, for the congregation, but there's somebody else who could step in.
Mm.
And so just making room, for other people's gifting and not trying to do it all oneself.
I've got a friend who says it this way. He says it to me a lot. Says, if someone can do something 80% as well as you can, you need to let them do it. And I think that's a pretty good general rule because what you find is most people can do something 80% as well as you can. And if that's then again, it kind of leads back to the last question. That's good enough. Like 80% as well. Like the truth that you'll find is that when you find someone who can do something 80% as well as you can, whatever it is, and you hand it over, they actually do better at it than you. Like they actually end up doing way better at it than you. And so yeah, I got to find the freedom to help people use their gifts. Like there are so many people around us that would do some of the things that we're trying to take on, especially in church culture. Oh my goodness, especially at church. There are people that are sitting there on the sidelines that actually are eager to help, but no one's put something on their plate. No one said, "Hey, I think you're good at this and I'd like you to start taking this on." And so, yeah, 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 I think that's a good one. What is someone else able to do? Great question. All right, question number five. What you got?
So this is what do I find invigorating? What energizes me? The interesting thing about burnout is not all stress results in burnout. There's a lot of things that actually create yeah, or pull energy from us. But as it's pulling, it's like we find ourselves replenished because it touches some of the deep drives, deep passions, deep purposes that we uncover or that we have. And I think with burnout, what's often behind it, if we're honest, is boredom, that
Mm,
there's something that we just loathe doing. And that disconnect between how we're built and what we enjoy and what we're having to do, it results in a kind of inner depletion.
mm,
But if we can find the things that invigorate us, so again, if we want to stay with the church, kind of context, that you might find yourself utterly drained by working with young kids, that's just
yeah,
not at all what you're
yeah,
able or equipped to do.
yeah.
But you might find that you meet with another man and do a one-to-one Bible study, and that was an extra thing on your calendar, you walked away and just felt alive. And so, if we can, insofar as we're able, find those things that we're really gifted to do, that in and of itself, if we can kind of redistribute some of our time and energy, can actually result in us having more energy,
Mm,
surprisingly.
mm. Yeah, there's another piece of this burnout talk that I hear a lot out there that bothers me. One is, yeah, that it's aimed primarily at pastors, but also that all the burnout talk team seems to be aimed at not necessarily white collar workers, but like knowledge workers. It's, most of the talk you hear is like it's knowledge workers that are burning out. And as a guy who has a long history of blue collar work and physical labor, I'm like, wait a second, do we not burn out? Like, so but what I've seen, I guess I've been blessed to be able to see both sides of it as I've got kind of multiple roles in what happens in the physical realm, what happens in the knowledge worker realm. And when I see guys doing it well, it's actually that they're doing a little bit of both. And I think
Mm,
that kind of gets to what you're talking about there is guys that get bored are often guys that are sitting in an office all day and then just going home. And there is no physical element to their life. So but if they'll get out and take walks or find a workout routine or go fishing, whatever it is, if they'll find something that's physical and active, all of a sudden that boredom, yeah, seems to go away and the burnout is less. But the same is true of like the blue collar guys who are out there doing hard work all day. If they don't eventually find something that's worth thinking about, something that's
yeah,
worth a project that's worth working on that isn't physical labor, then they eventually burn out too. And so I
that's
think that
good.
there's got to be a little bit of both, that if you're a guy that's out there and your job requires you to use your hands all the time, if you don't want to burn out, you need to find a way to use your mind at some point, and you need to really learn to exercise your mind well. And if you're a guy that's always using your mind, you got to exercise your body some. So I think there's just, yeah,
Yeah.
there's some of that the back and forth that has to happen if we're going to look at burnout there. All right, so that was, what do I find invigorating was that question. What's the next question? Number six.
Well, this kind of comes on the back of what you just said, but does my calendar indicate that I value non-productive, restorative activity? Which is kind of a strange way of putting it, but
Yeah.
if you actually look at your schedule, is it all productive, getting things done type stuff?
Hmm.
And if we're honest, just as you described, we're physical, we're mental, we're
Yeah.
spiritual beings, but equally, we're just not built. We're not designed
Hmm.
to always, be perfecting ourselves in some sort of, effective activity. And so, first of all, ask yourself, I mean, do you sleep? Like, if you don't sleep, that's going to affect, this issue of burnout. Um, do you actually worship, including
Hmm.
your own personal devotional life? That's not a to do. That's something else. That's worship again. And so that's got to be there. But
Yeah.
even beyond that, the things we often talk about with cross training, the friendship, the
Yeah.
fun, the leisure, the things that aren't because you tick a box, but just because they bring joy and liven. It's what kids do when they play, and even though we're grown-ups, we still need that same element in our life. And so look at your schedule. Does your actual calendar indicate that you value that stuff? If not, you're headed toward burnout.
Yeah. Yeah, there's got to be some activities on our calendar, both personally, both in our, if you're married in your marriage relationship, but also in your family relationship, that just includes just those people. I think our calendars become overloaded and are generally overloaded with great activities. If you've got young kids, especially, you're involved in all the, the soccer and the football and the, piano, all the things. But do you have anything as a family that's on your calendar where it's just you? Like, not that you, if your family is going to the park to do the soccer thing or going to church to do the church, like, does your family ever just do something just together, not trying to be productive in the sense of, joining a team. Like, no, we're just together. And the same should be true of your marriage. Like, do you ever just have time, just the two of you? And then thinking of yourself in that same way as well. Yeah, I find that we fail when we don't carve out those times in the calendar. I fail when he speaks personally. I fail when I don't carve out those times on the calendar, when it's not an activity that I'm joining someone else in for some purpose that they've created, but the purpose of just the activity is just to be together, just to do, just for our own thing. So yeah, that one's, yeah, super helpful. All right, what's number seven?
Okay, I'll have to explain this to guys, although we've probably, maybe referred to it before in a podcast. But the question is, when do I ride with a slack rein? And I use that language. It's something I've picked up from John Wesley. If you think back to the early Methodists, they did a lot of horseback itinerant preaching. And what he would always tell his kind of Methodist preachers was ride with a slack rein.
Huh.
So you got to go, you got to be doing stuff, but do it at a pace that in their case they could actually pray or they could read while they were actually on horseback. And
Mm,
it reminds me of something else, that John Wesley said that was real famous. He said once of himself, though I'm always in haste, I'm never in a hurry.
mm,
That he never pushed himself to this kind of agitated pace, and nobody got more done in their life than John Wesley. So I
mm,
mean, he was constantly doing things, but he would do it at a pace that he could maintain kind of a prayerful, composed spirit.
mm,
And so for me, I can't say that I always ride with a slack rein, but there are moments. I'm blessed in Scotland in that I can often walk or I can bicycle.
mm,
And by yeah, it adds maybe an extra 15 minutes for me to walk than if I were to maybe take a bus or drive. But that time is time that I can actually slow down. I can
yeah,
process.
yeah.
And I get to my next meeting, but again, I've got a kind of restored soul that if I jump in the car and even if I'm getting there quicker, but I'm in traffic or whatever else, it's a different state of mind. And so guys, their circumstance will be different, but when can you slow down just a little bit?
Uh,
Same thing, you're doing the same activity, but now at a pace which you can include maybe some conversation with God or
mm.
just some, processing some thoughts. So when can you ride with a slack rein?
If you take out if you take God out of what you just said, Joe, which I don't want to do, but if you do, you sound like one of the best-selling books right now. One of the best-selling books right now is Cal Newport's newest book, Slow Productivity. I don't know if you've read it
Yeah.
yet.
Yeah.
It's really good, but it's exactly what you just described. He's trying to help people see that you can get achievement without burnout, and he does it by explaining that we've fallen into this trap of pseudo productivity, and that this pseudo productivity is just us doing things because we feel like we must be doing things. So we're answering emails and going to meetings, doing all these things that make us look productive but aren't
Yeah.
actually productive. And his big takeaway, his big thing he's trying to push everybody to do, and it's a best-selling book, is slow down. Go
Yeah.
slow. Take it, ride with a slack rein. He's saying that exact same thing. So, man, you should have written the book earlier, Joe. You should, gosh, we had millions here that could have been.
Yeah.
But no, I think it's great advice, and that's obviously something that works to help prevent burnout. So, yes, that's a great one. All right. So, what's number eight? Give us the eighth question we need
Number
to know.
eight, I feel like this is like a preaching point or something.
All
I feel
right,
like this is like
good.
so are my mundane actions connected to majestic purposes?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but behind burnout's just short-sightedness. I mean, let's be honest. It'd be wonderful if we could take out all the emails, or if we could take off,
yeah.
not have to mow the grass, one week or whatever else, or go visit, that relative that you feel like you've seen 1,000 times, whatever it might be. Um, the amazing thing about Christianity is that everything can matter and it can matter infinitely.
Hmm,
And that there's that need to ability to weave what an old Puritan called like the silver thread of the glory of God through every action.
hmm,
And so if we can just stop from time to time and realize that Paul means what he says when he says our labor in Christ is not in vain,
hmm,
that we can bring the presence of Christ into that
hmm.
difficult conversation with a relative, or we really can be an ambassador in the workplace,
Yes.
in that difficult meeting, that if we can connect this stuff, it does echo through eternity, it matters infinitely, then the things that we can't take out of our life, at least we can, build them on a foundation that gives them real value. And I think that motivationally can really matter.
Mm, that's good. Yeah, I think one thing guys don't hear often enough is how much they matter to their community. You see,
Yeah.
you think about how God has gifted them and put them in the place where they are, and He's done it for a reason, and that what they are doing to the glory of God and for the good of their community. And that whatever your job is, at times, yes, you show up day to day and it feels mundane and it feels purposeless and it doesn't feel like you're making a difference. But the truth is, your community needs you. Whatever your small little task is, whatever it is that you're doing, you do have a huge purpose in the life of the community around you, and therefore in the life of what God is doing in your community. And we can't lose that sense. We can't lose that vision of, wow, my life, my work, my everything I'm doing, the way that the community I live in, all of this. And it affects others, and that's what we're, yeah, called to do. And so yeah, your work seems mundane, but your community needs it. Like someone, if you're not doing it, somebody else is getting hired to do that job. Because guess what? It's a need. It's a needed
Right.
role, and you fulfill a needed role in your community. So, man, take ownership of that. That's a big calling, and that's great. That's something to celebrate and do it well. All right. So we got to our last question now. What's the ninth question guys need to be asking themselves if they want to avoid burnout?
Okay, well, there's some critical person, and they're thinking all of this could be gleaned from this life management. Yeah, Cal Newport or
Yeah.
whoever. Like, you've not told me anything I couldn't get from some secular book, in some way.
Mm,
And this last one, I think this is not last because it's somehow least significant. This is, the most important of all of them. And I would just say, are you living by the spiritual secret of Galatians 2:20, which is the
mm,
verse where it's not I who live, but Christ who lives in me.
yeah.
I think the amazing thing about the Apostle Paul is, especially if you read in like Second Corinthians, he often sounds like he's on the verge of burnout. I mean,
Yeah.
let me just, he's talking in chapter 4, that we have this treasure in jars of clay. I mean, he's feeling brittle. He says, we're afflicted in every way, but not crushed, perplexed, not in despair, persecuted, not forsaken, struck down, not destroyed. I mean, this is a
Mm,
guy, just feeling the weight of life to a degree that none of us has ever felt.
mm,
And yet, in the midst of it, he's just also exuding with the life of Christ. And
mm,
it is that paradox of our faith that when we feel weak, when we recognize our insufficiency, that, in that place of humility, like there's that grace that gathers and Christ lives in us. And so I think the most important thing, that we're waking up and each day needing to do is, connecting with Christ,
mm,
recognizing that I can bring my weakness before him, that he has the capacity to hold me up. He does ask me to be wise. He does say things like do the one thing needful.
mm.
If I
Yeah.
listen, pull his yoke, but don't try to pull all the yokes of the world. I mean, so he will call us to let go of some things or to
Mm.
let go of some audiences, but if we go to him in that need, he's going to give us strength. He's going to be the one that keeps us, persevering in the midst of just the afflictions and difficulties that will be a part of every man's life.
That's good. You just gave us hope and it gave me some relief there because, yeah, the messages I get from all the self-help kind of books are excellent and practically helpful in the day to day. But I ultimately end up feeling like, well, in my own power, I don't think I can still do all of this.
That's right.
So, yeah, you just really were saying, no, self-reliance isn't going to get you there. That's exactly right. That's the picture that we as Christian men live under, and the belief that we live under is that on my own and relying on my own power on with self-reliance, no, this doesn't. Not only does it not work, but it's not worthwhile and it's not joyful. Like the most joyful men I see are doing work that yes matters to them, doing work that yes makes a difference in their community, but doing it in such a way that they're joyful because they're not relying on their own power. They see themselves as insignificant and they see
Yeah.
themselves as this is all by God's grace. This is all by the power of God. These are the kind of things they say time and time again. And that's what we want to push ordinary Christian men to be. Be the guy that's saying, man, this is by God's power and God's grace. I rely on him and Him alone. And it's in Him and through Him that I take on my day and tackle the ridiculous amount of tasks that we have to do. Because, yeah, if you tried to be husband, father, worker, and do all the church stuff in self-reliance, man, yeah, you're going to burn out. It's foolishness. It's foolishness. So, anything to wrap us up on this topic of um, just burnout and helping ordinary guys avoid burnout?
I think just that last point. I mean, what we're trying to do at cross training is help guys figure out what that looks like, how to
Mm,
the whole language of abiding in Christ,
yeah.
and how to set yourself up to be able to do that in the midst of all of these demands and struggles that are part of life. So if guys are looking for more, stay involved. Look in some of our programming, and we'd love to help you shape a lifestyle that frees you up from some of the unnecessary burdens, but
Mm.
then also gives you the strength to shoulder the ones that you have to be willing to carry.
And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention got a little bit of an inside scoop that I want to share with guys. I laid down in bed last night. My wife said, "Hey, aren't you and Joe recording a podcast in the morning?" It's like, "Yeah." And she said, "What's it on?" I said, "Burnout." She said, "Oh, well, that's timely." Like, what do you mean? She said, "Well, this is the time of year when moms burn out." And I was like, "What?" She said, "Yeah, the end of the school year. Apparently, I had no idea. The end of the school year is a time when moms are burning out. There's so many activities and things going on that they're burning out." I bring that up not because we have moms listening. We don't. I don't think there's many women listening to this, but I know we have married men that are listening. So, guys,
Yes.
these questions are for you, but I want you to take these 9 questions and now think about, how do these apply to my wife? What are some things that she's doing that I could do that may help her not burn out in this season? Because apparently, inside scoop, your wife may be approaching burnout right now in this season. So we as Christian men can begin to step up and help and accommodate and be the kind of loving and supportive and sacrificial men that God's called us to be. So y'all go out, do this. Don't burn out. Reach out to us if you need any help. We're here to help you. And we'll see you again next time on the podcast.